When we talk about global trade, our minds usually jump straight to tariffs, right? Those taxes countries slap on imported goods. But honestly, tariffs, they're just the tip of the iceberg. The real story, the thing that truly shapes what we buy and how much we pay for it, well, that lies in a tangled web of invisible walls. So let's pull back the curtain on these hidden rules of the game.
I mean, think about it. We are more connected right now than at any point in history. The phone in your hand, the coffee in your mug, the car you drive, so much of our world crosses borders every single day. It's this massive, incredibly complex global machine. So what happens when a country wants to protect its own industries, but it doesn't want to use a simple tax? Well, that's when they get creative. They build walls you can't see. These are subtle, sneaky rules designed to give their own businesses an edge, and they have a huge impact.
And here's what they're called: non-tariff barriers, or NTBs for short. Basically, it's any roadblock to trade that isn't a tariff. And here's the crazy part. As global tariffs have been falling for decades, the use of these NTBs has absolutely skyrocketed. They are the new weapon of choice in trade disputes.
Okay, so let's start with the most straightforward way to build one of these walls. No subtlety here. You just set a hard limit on what can come into your country. Let's talk about the bluntest tool in the box: the quota.
An import quota is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a government saying, all right, you can import, say, 10 million pairs of shoes this year, but that's it. Once that number is hit, the door just slams shut. No more shoes until next year. It's a direct physical cap on the competition.
And here's what that does to the price. It's simple economics, really. By choking off the supply of imported cheese, like you see here, there's just less cheese to go around. And when something's more scarce, the price shoots up. In this example, it doubles. Now, that's great for the local cheesemakers who can now charge more, but it's all of us, the consumers, who end up paying for it at the checkout.
Okay, so that's the textbook theory. But to see how this plays out in the real world, we have a perfect example. We just have to look at the bittersweet story of the U.S. sugar industry. It's been protected by this kind of system for a very, very long time.
Get this. Back in 2013, the price of sugar inside the United States was 43 cents a pound. Now, that might not sound like a lot, right? But then you look at the average world price at the time. It was just 26 cents. That huge gap is a direct result of these import quotas.
And a price difference like that creates these massive ripple effects. American food companies got hit hard. Famously, candy makers like Hershey and Brach's actually moved factories to Canada and Mexico just to get access to cheaper sugar. And here's the kicker. The financial benefits from this protection, they don't go to everyone. They are incredibly concentrated, with almost half the cash going to just 1% of all sugar growers in the U.S.
So a quota is like using a sledgehammer. But what if a government wants to be a little more subtle? Well, there are plenty of other clever rules designed to tip the scales in favor of their own industries.
Take, for example, something called a voluntary export restraint. And I'm using air quotes here for a reason. Back in the 80s, the U.S. was putting a ton of pressure on Japan over its car exports. So Japan voluntarily agreed to limit them. But this quote tells the real story. It wasn't voluntary at all. It was a strategic move to stop the U.S. from hitting them with something even worse, like a massive tariff.
And look what happened. The agreement starts in '81. With fewer Japanese cars available, the prices for them in the U.S. shot up. But here's the unintended consequence, the big twist. By 1985, what did Toyota, Honda, and Nissan do? They just started building their factories inside the United States, which completely changed the American auto industry forever.
And that leads us right to another clever rule, the domestic content requirement. This is basically a government saying, look, if you want to sell your product here, a certain chunk of it has to be made here, using our parts and our labor. It's a way to force companies to keep jobs in manufacturing at home.
So it makes you wonder, how American is a car that's built in America? Let's take a look. This is a 2018 Honda Accord, assembled in Ohio. 60% of its parts, by value, come from right here in North America, but that means the other 40% comes from all over the world. It's a perfect snapshot of just how global modern manufacturing really is, even with these rules.
All right, but what happens when things get really messy? When one country straight up accuses another of cheating? Well, that brings us to one of the most heated topics in all of trade policy, the ongoing battle against dumping.
So dumping can be defined in a couple of ways. First, there's the price-based version. That's when you sell something in another country for way cheaper than you sell it back home. Then there's the cost-based version. That's selling a product for less than it even cost you to make it. Either way, it's seen as an unfair tactic to crush the local competition.
And for a perfect modern-day example of this, we have to talk about the battle of the washing machines. It's been a long, drawn-out war between the American appliance giant Whirlpool and its South Korean rivals, Samsung and LG. For years, Whirlpool has been accusing them of illegally dumping washers on the US market.
And this whole thing turned into this incredible cat-and-mouse game. Check this out. In 2013, the US hits washers from South Korea and Mexico with tariffs. So what do Samsung and LG do? They just move production to China. So then the US targets China. No problem, they just move production again, this time to Vietnam and Thailand. This country hopping shows just how tough it is to police these rules with giant multinational companies.
So the fight finally escalated until 2018 when the US government just threw up its hands and imposed what are called safeguard tariffs on all imported washing machines no matter where they came from. The result? Tariffs as high as 50%. And guess who paid the price? American consumers. Prices jumped about 12%, which meant you were paying an extra $86 for a new machine.
So when you boil it all down, here's the real price of protection. All of these non-tariff barriers, quotas, content rules, you name it, they create a fundamental trade-off. Yes, they absolutely can help a specific company like Whirlpool or a small group of sugar farmers, but they almost always do it by raising prices for everybody else. It creates winners, for sure, but it also creates losers, and often a net loss for the economy as a whole.
Which really leaves us with the big, difficult question at the end of all this. These invisible walls are always built to protect someone, but in our deeply connected world, protecting one group almost always means someone else has to pay the price. The real debate isn't whether these walls exist, it's who they're really for and who's ultimately footing the bill.